Okay. So she's currently an assistant professor in the Department of Architecture and Planning at IIT Roorkee. She has worked on prestigious projects focusing on conservation while working with development and research organizations on nature, art, and heritage. Projects and events discussing craft and technology, design innovations, and interior architecture during her tenure as a senior researcher at Design Innovation and Craft Resource Center at CEPT University, with a focus on conducting workshops, prototyping, developing monographs based on these, and creating material inventories. Projects and events that focus on art, craft, interior architecture traditions of Uttarakhand with IIT Roorkee and Ministry of Culture, and the joint project on model village development for the Jong tribe of Odisha funded by HUDCO. She's passionate about cultural and architectural heritage, traditional building practices, indigenous communities, craft and technology, skill development, creative and cultural industries, writing narratives, anthropological quests, and ethnographic approaches in architecture and pedagogy. I would like to invite Smriti ma'am for sharing her presentation.
Thank you, Shweta. I'll just share my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And am I audible enough?
Yes.
All right. So, in continuation to what Professor Ram Satish already showed, because he covered a lot of cultural aspects and also talked about narratives that get created and disseminated through stone as a material. I would like to also talk about the storytelling power of the buildings or the built forms and how stone as a building material could bring forth those narratives and even be an important part of the process of building that narrative as well as the structure, the physical structure that gets created. So, I'm talking about the Indian context specifically, and within that, also, I'll concentrate on one particular building because it was very fascinating for me to, do my field study in the premise of this building and be associated with it for a decade now. And I still see that even after spending so much time and doing so much documentation, even writing a book on it, there is so much to still, reveal about it, learn about it, and there is every day as part of the process of making it has fascinating, um, uh, information to come up, and there is a lot of discovery each day. So this particular building is in Agra, the city of Taj Mahal, and I'll just show you some pictures and how the narrative builds. So basically, when we talk about narratives in stone architecture, how I see stone is like a narrative medium. So stonecraft is a narrative medium for the interior architecture. And when I see it as a narrative medium, there are like two fundamental research questions that come to my mind. So, how do narratives happen in a space through the medium of crafts? And here specifically, I'm talking about the stone crafts. And this craft could be stone inlay, stone carving, or merely just the crafting of a stone arch or putting together pieces to form a space making element like a wall or a dome. Like Ram was also explaining in one of his projects, how community themselves made those walls and domes on the site. So, even that process of crafting those space making elements that conjoin to formulate a entire building, that itself is a craft. And when the narratives are expressed through crafts, how does the symbolic universe get reflected? Gets reflected. So these are two premises based on which I have done these studies. And as hypothesis, what I could really understand is what that every stone is a piece of communication, and it can be like a word. It is like the it adds to the overall syntax of the structure. And the stonecraft has an inherent possibility of being integral to the grammar of the structure. And it forms a discourse, it has a sort of a story, it has characters and entities. And there's a particular system and structure that it follows, which ultimately creates a narrative, just like a human language. So, it is keeping all this in mind, it is very important and crucial to understand stonecraft narratives in the context of belief systems that form a backdrop. And they are also a driving force for the people as an interesting interplay between craft and cultural milieu. So, whenever we try to understand these stone built forms, especially in the context of India, there are so many backdrop narratives that happen simultaneously, and there is this very fascinating interplay between the cultural milieu, people, and the craft. That it is very very crucial to understand this interrelationship, and it helps us also gather a lot of information regarding the human behavior, the built environment, and ultimately the buildings in which we dwell. So, this is what has fascinated me for several years. And if we see in the Indian context, we see several narratives, we see several stone buildings. And here, what is being put on the slide are only some examples of the traditional built forms. But if in any of the upcoming sessions I discuss about the contemporary built forms, even then we could find different kinds of narratives. It's just that the um, focus may have shifted, but there are still lots of narratives within the stone, and there is this encompassing of several stories which we see through these stone crafts within the built forms that we study or which we inhabit or where we come together for prayers or offerings or for different functions. So, whether we see Khajuraho or this very famous stepped well from Gujarat, or temples from the very famous narratives from the very famous Meenakshi temple, and other examples, there are several narratives of say religion, mythology, culture, everyday life, and things like that. And we have also seen these kinds of narratives in Jataka stories and several other examples of Indian narratology. So, here, if I see this panel, it is one of the Jataka stories, that is, stories related to Buddha. And we see this is an example of sequential narrative, and a very eminent scholar, Vidya Dahejia, from Columbia University, she has done a lot of research on these Jataka stories, and she has tried to study this interrelationship between, the storytelling and stonecraft, and how there are different kinds of narratives like sequential, and then there is a mono narrative, or it may be a combined narrative and conflicted narrative and things like that. I'm not getting into details. So if we see these two images over here, and we see these stone columns, here they are forming, like here they are acting as framing devices. So there is one story, and then there's a framing device, and then it continues, and there is another framing device. So there is a certain narrative, and there is a certain way to create those frames, like we have in uh, our movies and documentaries, and scripts that we have, scene one, scene two, a frame one, frame two. So we use framing devices there also. So this is again like power of storytelling through stone as a material, and the process of making, which is employed by the stone karigars. And it creates a narrative of that era, or it creates narrative about a particular person's life who is in focus. Here it is Buddha, about whom it has been discussed, and we still see all these kinds of narratives, whether in the Bhimbetka paintings that we just saw, or these kinds of Jataka stories, or Ajanta Ellora caves, or different kinds of building typologies across India from different time periods. So this was a very fascinating background research with which I started understanding the interrelationship between the interior architecture and stone crafts, and where the stone crafts acted as a narrative medium to talk about the story of that built form. And this is the one building which I'm going to discuss in detail, particularly, and I'm also looking forward to tell this story through one of the documentaries that we are looking forward to create as part of this project. It could be like one small story which talks about this kind of an interrelationship. So this building basically it's being constructed for more than 125 years. The construction is still going on. And I find it a very exemplary illustration of celebrating materials, tools, and techniques. And we see some very exquisite construction details and stone carvings, inlay, filigree work, and different kinds of crafts. And the entire process of making is very fascinating. And there's no particular religion that it endorses. And it is basically a faith which talks about everybody coming together. And there is no distinction of class, creed, race, color whatsoever. And whosoever comes and joins the system within, they come here as devotees for seva, and they just surrender themselves in the service. So this is basically a faith which has actually formed the basis or the cornerstone for this built form or the building to evolve. So there is a very profound interplay of belief system, stories, and then this building getting constructed side by side. And the historical examples that we saw above, they basically talk about different kinds of narratives. Like I was telling, maybe mythology or religion or society, environment, culture, space, all of them. But if we see this building, Radha Swami Samad, this is a sort of an assemblage. Here we see these multiple narratives all together in like one space. And there is this outside world, and then there is this inside faith, this Radha Swami Samad, and they have this strong connection between the two. And why I'm taking a little time to explain this is that I'll quickly switch to the visuals in some time. But I just want to emphasize that there was this very fascinating process of understanding the belief system and the faith, and how the people related to that faith wanted to conceive this building. And because the faith and their stories gave a certain kind of direction and certain kind of imagery or visualization to this built form, it could actually happen. So it's very important that all these stakeholders come together and their stories get told. So that was a very fascinating part. And also, what I saw in this building is that there are narratives from different time periods, since it is getting constructed for more than 125 years. So this one particular building itself was chosen to, understand this interrelationship between narratives and interior architecture. And if we see that, this Radha Swami Samad, the building that I'm talking about, it is basically a spiritual renaissance because it identifies all the kinds of religions, faiths, and groups and cults. And basically, they have a very linear narrative. They talk about faith, they talk about a belief system, they talk about people coming together, but there is an eclectic discourse. So what happens is that if we see the use of stone crafts at different levels, horizontally and vertically, and initial 25 years, and then later, if I divide that into 25, 25, 25, and so on, we will see a very marked difference, how the narratives are shifting. So the story is linear, but the discourse or telling is very eclectic, because as and when whosoever joins this sort of a group or a faith, they just become an integral part of it, but they may have their own methods of working or own methods of expressing the devotion or seva, but nonetheless, the work keeps on happening. And as and when people join, the building keeps getting constructed. So whosoever comes here, not just as an architect or a structural engineer, but people from nearby, the communities, the karigars, or even if there are people who are not trained, they are explained the process, or they just become a part of it very inherently as part of devotion, because they are doing it for a higher power who they think is the supreme being, without having any face or persona. So that was very interesting about this building. It has a sort of it has universal narratives, like people across the civilizations do relate to this idea of a supreme creator or a guru or an idol. And if we see stone as a material, we coming from different regions of India or even outside India, we do associate with this material which has a sort of universal vocabulary, and like we were discussing yesterday during one of the presentations, it has a sort of an association with it which makes it sacred material. It is also sometimes specifically talking about marble and its color white, which talks about purity. So there's a certain universality about using stone as a material and creating a certain building which talks about faith to which different people connect in a same manner. And there is a convergence of people here. They all come together, and their common point of reference is this narrative universe. And there are lots of motives and stories which, again, people relate to in a very universal manner. And there is pure craftsmanship and exquisite details that we see here. And especially, there is a use of marble in this building. And it's very easy to achieve geometry using marble. It provides excellent opportunities for carving and inlay. It doesn't scatter that easily compared to other stones, and lots of other examples. And there is this very unique craftsmanship and still hands on that we see in the entire building, which makes it very fascinating to study. And like I was telling you, there is this sense of devotion and seva with which whosoever comes at whatever point in time, they just join the construction, and the building keeps getting constructed. There's also a sort of myth or a legend which is associated to it, that there are two conflicting groups, Radha Swami Samad and Dayal Bagh, and they are in a sort of a conflict, and the building is not getting constructed because it can only get constructed once that conflict is over. So there is a certain kind of narrative that builds around this building, and we see that it is still getting constructed, and some or the other construction work keeps happening there. So there's a very strong role of these myths, legends, stories that form the backdrop narrative of constructing this building. And there is a sort of timelessness because we see that it is still getting made. Yeah, so for the analysis of this building in terms of stone crafts and how it is getting made, I had indulged in field work where we were documenting narratives. There were some questionnaires that were made, and then the measure drawings were also done. And actually, this building was never documented before this. And after this portfolio was made, I could contribute in sharing these drawings with few architects like Rahul Mehrotra who had approached me, and later I could also publish them in form of papers. So it was very interesting to understand through sections and other technical details exactly what is happening at the building level. And like the documentation of narratives was also done, and the three major narratives that could be understood were like oral, textual, and transcendental. And transcendental were quite out of the scope of the thesis that was done, so I just restricted to the others. So this kind of documentation happened. There was a very subtle framework to it. Yeah, some questionnaires were prepared, and this analysis happened. And what was interesting to also understand narrative, as a system of working. What are the elements in stone, and what is the work distribution, and also in terms of time intervals and their variations. So, like I was telling you, in the first 25 years, we see the narratives of beliefs, then we see sort of spread, and then we see the narratives of establishment, and finally, we talk about the further spread of the established narrative. And it was also fascinating to understand the eye level and placement of craft, like at what respect to the eye level a certain stone craft is placed and why. What is the active field and what is the passive field? And like this building, if I remember correctly, from the ground level to the top finial is like 193 feet, almost 200 feet. So if the subject is standing on the ground and I have to look at the uppermost dome and the filigree work which is there on the dome. So if as a subject I am able to see it from the ground level, this means that with respect to my placement and eye level, the kind of scaling and the kind of detailing which is done on the dome is deliberately done in that manner that it is visible from the ground level. So those kinds of details were also mapped and their inventory was made. So this was very interesting. Like I was telling you, the elements and work distribution. So to understand how stone carving happens, how many karigars work on it, and if there is an arch, what could be the smallest possible radius to the largest possible, and how was the column done, the base, the shaft, and the capital, and how many workers were there to work on the jali, and so on. Same goes for the stone inlay. And this dome has very exquisite work. It is called pahadi work, and the carving there is as deep as 5 inches. So what are the stages to do that? And again, sizes and the work distribution, how it happens on the site, and what are the different tools, what are the sizes, what is the maximum possible size of stone which could be inlaid, and just trying to analyze it out of the entire building, how much percentage basically is covered by the stone craft. So plain stone is 50% and the remaining 50% is the stone craft, that is carving and inlay. So trying to just understand that through the study of the building. Also, I try to document the oral narratives, the visual narratives, and textual narratives. So this is just one drawing where I was trying to understand the local parlance and how the karigars work on site, and the stone, uh, the column base is what they call as kursi, and then there is this capital which they call as bharna, and this. There are lots of other elements within architecture, like a pediment or things like that, which they call with other names. So that was very interesting to document and to just understand what vocabulary is used on the site. And what was fascinating, like how Ram was saying, sometimes even they were not provided any drawings. They would just make things on their own. They would just do things out of memory or what they observe in their nearby surroundings, situated in the nature with the kinds of motifs that they see in the vicinity. So that liberty is given to all the karigars, and not all of them are basically sculptors or nakshikars or inlay workers, but they come here as devotees and they become a part of this system. They get trained and then they start working on the site. This is how it happens most of the times. And I also try to understand the system in terms of the stakeholders and what is the hierarchy amongst them, and what is the work experience, the youngest ones to the oldest ones. And it was very fascinating to understand this entire system. Because yeah, we can talk about storytelling, narratives, we can understand the cultural aspects, be very, very romantic about these things, which is also important. But then it is also equally important to understand the technicalities, the system of work, how things happen on the site. So trying to navigate between these two parallel universes was a sort of a revelation and very interesting process for me. And yeah, a little bit of chronology here. Yeah, so this is basically the building, and they also sort of they have created it as an iconic building. Also, something like, yeah, I mean, we also have something like a Taj Mahal. Why not? A very grand building which talks about the supreme creator and its spread. So there are several narratives, and then there is this entire intention behind conceptualizing this building in terms of disseminating about this faith and creating a sort of an iconic image. And this is what I was telling few slides ago, that we can try and relate the built form also with their philosophy, how the ground floor was conceived and what was the focus that time, and going higher towards the top level. We see those shifts also in the narratives. So ground floor, basically we see the founding belief system, and then further we see how the narratives are shifting. I'm not really talking much about their faith and what the focus is, but just trying to explain this shift in the narrative. And there's we see these narratives across vertical expense, across horizontal expense at different levels, and there is this first level application of this um, theory by Roland Barthes, where he talks about different narratives forming a complete narrative universe, and that narratives happen at different levels and not in isolation. So that was a sort of analogy that I was trying to understand through studying this built form. So finally, these were the classifications that I could come up with: visual narratives, which are like visual and textual, and then cultural narratives, where we see linguistics, belief system, and few eclectic narratives, and of course, narratives of nature, because we see a lot of floral motifs over here, and spatial narratives, because we are analyzing also the built form and the spatial organization. So these were the narratives which are shown here very, very visually, and I will keep flipping and browsing through the slides. Yeah, so we see here in this, the gateway, the story, the Kadam tree, and then there are some stories. If I try to find parallel, like in the miniature paintings, they have also depicted the Kadam tree, and we find similar references in other art forms and across different genres. So those kinds of influences were also seen. And at varied scales and proportions, these motifs have been created, and they are very, very exquisite, extremely detailed out, and they take a lot of time. So, like even a small railing, say 2 feet by 2 feet, could take up to like 6 months if it is detailed carving. And also, like the twin columns that we see here can take anywhere like 7 to 9 months, and even more if it is too elaborate. So, that kind of mapping was done. And we also see the variation of one single motif, which is placed, at different eye levels and in different variations. And so, for example, like this lotus, we see it is there on the ceilings. It is also there here, between the arches, and also we see it placed on the column capitals. And they are sort of very 3D and volumetric because they have been chiseled out and created in that manner. So that is how the stonecraft brings out the sort of detailing and intricacies and aesthetics. And we also see lots of narratives of eclecticism. We see the arches in different styles. We see some elements of Hindu architecture, Gothic architecture, Mughal architecture. And there are lots of influences from other religions, since it is an assemblage of all of these. So that is what we see here as cultural narratives. And we see further narratives of linguistics. So they have these very popular monograms, and they have been done in different scripts: Devanagari, Urdu, Gujarati, and Arabic, English, whatnot. So these are also very diverse and eclectic, and they are visual as well as textual. And like I was telling you about some stories of conflicts and others, so there are some myths and legends, and there are some influences of that, because of which a certain element has been constructed and added as part of this premise or the entire process. So this is how it builds up through the stories and slowly catches up, as and when, and then the premise keeps getting constructed or expanded and things like that. And then we see several narratives of nature. So floral motifs, and also like because they don't believe in like one persona or one image or one person, this is also trying to achieve godliness through depicting nature. And we also see some foreign motifs, like hollyhock and other. These are botanical names which have been etched over here. So we see that those kinds of details over here. So probably these are foreign motives, or it's also said that in the initial years there was this architect Frizzoni who was associated with the construction of the building, and he had brought with him some karigars or masons who were from the, of course, from the foreign land, and that is what is depicted over here. So we have those kinds of motives also. And then if we try to understand the spatial narratives, then of course we can understand and decode this entire building in terms of, what is the axis, where the center lies. So center, of course, is the samad over here, which is the shrine of the supreme creator, around which all the people gather and then they just meditate. And we see enclosure through majestic dome, which is the very central focus of this entire build form. And of course, there are means of articulation, and we try to understand through several space making elements like columns, arches, walls, floors, ceilings. You know, how one is navigating and what kind of space is opening up to the user and what kind of experience, sensory experience is building up through them. So we see all these spatial narratives: the center, axis, path, what is a spiritual space and what is the um, enclosing space, and things like that. And this is the portfolio of the measure drawings which were done to understand the entire build form. This is something that I was trying to explain, you know, with respect to eye level, and as we go towards the top finial, how certain details have been placed in terms of craft. So basically, this is taken as the highest abode, and then the pure gold and marble has been used here, and there is lots of detailing. We see this huge dome, which is the central focus of the built form, because it has certain metaphysics. It represents cosmos. It represents people coming together underneath it, and having this universal narrative across different groups that they belong to. And it has this huge filigree work that is quite visible from very far off. So, and here we see intricate carving and inlay at the, this level, ground floor level, because it can be then seen very, very clearly if somebody is navigating in this, on this floor. So that kind of placement of craft with respect to eye level and how it communicates more important space making elements or more important parts of the building, which are sort of icons or statements in themselves, vis-a-vis less intricate parts of the building, which are more like common and not really built with the intention to make them stand out. So we see that kind of variation also. And yes, across horizontal and vertical expanse, we see different kinds of, viewpoints and space making elements that have been highlighted. We see symmetry, we see certain repetition, certain elements which have been repeated. So we also see lots of principles of design over here, and how this has been really conceived in a very visual manner with a sort of preconceived image in mind. Yeah, I'll just flip through these. These were the inventories that I had created, which I found a very interesting tool to understand the process of making. So, plinth, floor, what is the type, what is the build form, construction, what are the semantics or symbolism behind this, and certain observations and understanding for different kinds of space making elements. So, like, this is elaborate, this is for column. So they were load bearing, non-load bearing, and then different kinds of stone craft. What were the build forms associated with the column, from circular to trapezoidal and whatever? How was the construction done? What kind of joinery? What were the semantics or symbolism associated with them? Different functions that the different column types cater to, embellishment or absence of it. Variations with time, what kind of columns we see on the ground floor, they're too elaborate compared to what we see on the fourth floor, and things like that. So those kinds of inventories were created for each element. Also for technique like carving, how does it happen? So from plain work to the polishing, there are certain steps which are associated with it, and all those details. Also for inlay. And there are lots of interviews of craftspersons and also lots of videos that I have, and probably we will incorporate them as repository of the project. Also the motifs, there is an inventory on motifs. Yeah, so basically, if I try to conclude what I understood, or what we can gather out of this one particular building itself, which offers so many opportunities. Um, so first thing is that narrative is a fundamental perceptual form, and we don't see the world around us until and unless it is put in a narrative mode, because we are all humans and we like stories around us. So this entire building basically is constructed through the process of narrative. So it's very, very interesting that way. And there is a certain intention behind every narrative. So if we see much of our built environment, including, cities, buildings, all of these, they always have a narrative intent, but they are hardly acknowledged due to they are hardly acknowledged in sort of academic settings, and also because of the lot of transdisciplinary nature and a lack of rigorous methodology to really being able to understand this interrelationship. So here the narrative intent is very clear that these narratives have to tell the philosophy of this faith that this building is celebrating and how it is done. So even the placement of craft and the element of space making, they are all narratives of some specific functions, and they all have this intention to talk about this building and to disseminate the faith that they believe in and endorse. Then narratives will always have a medium, because and how do you tell a story if there is no medium to tell it? So here clearly the narrative medium is stone crafts, what we see in the building. So all the images of the Radhaswami Samad are actually seen through these motifs and different kinds of stone crafts which highlight these motifs, whether carving or inlay. Also the craft of, like I was telling you, putting these elements together in place and then creating this entire assemblage and an entire premise which has been constructed. So stone carvings and stone inlays, they have been used as media to highlight the story behind the forms. And this samadh has what can be called as configurational or simultaneous narratives. So again, linking back to the background research that I did with Vidya Dahejia's work, where she had tried to explain the mononarrative or simultaneous or conflicted or whatever, there are like 7 kinds. Here we see simultaneous narratives. And yeah, I mean, through this narrative, we have this sense of time, space, and identity when we talk about this building. And it was also highlighted in several interviews that were done. And, the kinds of discussions that I had with different kinds of people associated with this building, right from the priest level to the karigar who does work. So it makes sense of time, space, and identity through narrative as history. There is a processional nature that we see in narratives of Radhaswami Samad, and there is a sort of endless nature attached to it, because it is still getting constructed, and there is a lot of myth around, the completion of the building. So there is basically a sort of completeness in incompleteness. So those kinds of narratives are there in the building. And yes, of course, the narratives here, they follow a system. There is a proper system that they follow, and there is a structure embedded within them. We see them across different levels, like I was explaining. And they do not necessarily follow a linear episodic structure. They are back and forth, and there are multiple narrators. There are so many stakeholders in this building. So what Stonecraft does is that it acts as a sutradhar, which has a very tremendous power to act as a backdrop and then bind the story of all these multiple narrators. So what I'm just trying to say is that the process of crafts and interior architecture can be interpreted through the medium of narratives in order to fill the gap between our traditional methods, like Shilpi tradition, where the craft skills were employed by these karigars, and they could actually create some stunning built forms and objects and sculptures out of it. And lots of designers and architects still rely on sthapatis and shilpkars to come up with lots of details in stone. So we can try to fill up the gap between that tradition and today's designer tradition, and try to understand how buildings build up through story, and how each person who is a part of the making has a very profound role to play. So yeah, thank you so much. That is the entire story of this building.